The message came at dawn on a Tuesday. Commander Idris Vega was drinking coffee in her small apartment on Titan Station when her communicator buzzed. She ignored it at first. Her shift at the defense station did not start for another 3 hours. Her daughter Maya was still sleeping in the next room, and her husband Kofi was making breakfast in the kitchen. The smell of eggs filled the air. The communicator buzzed again. Then again. Then it would not stop. She picked it up and saw 17 missed calls from Fleet Command. Her blood went cold. "Kofi," she said quietly, "turn on the news." The holographic screen flickered to life. The news anchor was crying. Behind her, footage showed massive ships entering the Sol system. Ships that did not belong to humanity. Ships that belonged to the Zorath Empire. The Zorath were one of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy. They controlled 3 spiral arms and had conquered hundreds of worlds. To them, humans were nothing. Just another primitive species that had barely learned to travel between stars. Earth had joined the Galactic Assembly only 80 years ago. Humans were newcomers. They were weak. They were insignificant, or so the Zorath believed. 3 days earlier, the Zorath Empire had sent a message to Earth. They demanded complete surrender. All humans would become part of their slave caste. Human worlds would become Zorath property. Human children would work in Zorath mines. Human culture would be erased. The United Earth Coalition had refused. Now the Zorath had come to teach humanity a lesson. Ice watched the screen as the first Zorath warship opened fire on Mars. The city of Olympus, home to 2 million people, disappeared in a flash of light. The weapon was something humans had never seen before. It turned the ground itself into fire. Buildings melted. People became ash in seconds. There was no warning. There was no chance to run. "Oh God," Kofi whispered behind her. The Zorath fleet split into 3 groups. One headed for the moon. One stayed at Mars. And one turned toward Saturn. Toward Titan. Toward them. Idris grabbed her communicator and called Fleet Command. No answer. She called the defense station. No answer. She called everyone she knew. Nothing. The communication networks were overloaded with millions of people trying to reach their loved ones. "We have to go," she said. "We have to get to the evacuation ships." She ran to Maya's room and picked up her daughter. The girl was only 7 years old. She was confused and scared. She asked why Mommy was crying. Idris could not answer. They ran through the corridors of Titan Station. Thousands of other people were running too. Some were screaming. Some were praying. Some had already given up and simply stood still, waiting for death. The evacuation bay was chaos. There were not enough ships. There were never enough ships. Idris pushed through the crowd, holding Maya tight against her chest. Kofi was right behind her, his hand on her shoulder. They were 50 meters from the nearest ship when the ceiling exploded. Idris was thrown to the ground. Her ears rang. Her vision blurred. She could feel blood running down her face. She tried to stand, but her legs would not work. "Maya," she called out. "Kofi." She could not hear her own voice. She could only hear a high-pitched ringing that seemed to come from inside her skull. She crawled forward. The floor was covered with debris and bodies. She saw a small hand sticking out from under a metal beam. A hand wearing a bracelet made of colorful beads. A bracelet that Maya had made in school last week. I screamed. She dug through the rubble with her bare hands. Her fingers bled. Her nails broke. She did not stop. She could not stop. When she finally pulled her daughter free, Maya was not breathing. Her eyes were open, but they saw nothing. The bracelet was still on her wrist. Idris held her daughter's body and screamed. Until she had no voice left. She never found Kofi. The attack lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 4.2 million humans were dead. Titan Station was destroyed. Mars Olympus was gone. The lunar city of New Geneva was a crater of glass and ash. The Zorath had not invaded. They had not conquered. They had simply killed and left. They broadcast the destruction across the entire galaxy. A warning, they called it. A lesson for lesser species who dared to refuse the Zorath Empire. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Assembly held an emergency session. Representatives from 100 species gathered in the Great Hall on the neutral world of Nexus Prime. They came to discuss the human situation. Most of them expected the humans to beg for help, to plead for protection, to accept whatever terms the Zorath offered. Commander Idris Vega stood before them. She had been promoted to Admiral after the attack. Not because she wanted it, because there was almost no one left. Half of Earth's military leadership had been on Titan Station for a conference. They were all dead now. Idris looked out at the assembly. She saw the Zorath ambassador sitting in the front row. He was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms. His face showed no expression, but his eyes were amused. He was enjoying this. He expected to watch a broken species grovel at his feet. The other ambassadors whispered among themselves. They pointed at the human. Such a small species. Such a young species. What could she possibly do? Idris waited until the hall was silent. Then she spoke. Her voice was calm. It was steady. It carried no emotion. That was what made it terrifying. 3 weeks ago, your empire murdered 4.2 million of my people. You killed my husband. You killed my daughter. You burned our cities and laughed while we screamed. She paused. The Zorath ambassador smiled. You expected us to surrender. You expected us to break. You expected us to come here and beg for mercy. She took 1 step forward. We will not beg. We will not break. We will not forget what you have done. She looked directly at the Zorath ambassador. Her eyes were cold and hard like iron. You fired the first shot. Now we are coming for you. The hall erupted in laughter. The Zorath ambassador stood and spread his 4 arms wide. Listen to this little creature, he said. She threatens the greatest empire in the galaxy. What will you do, human? Throw rocks at our warships? Idris did not react. She did not argue. She simply turned and walked out of the hall. The galaxy laughed at her warning. They would not laugh for long. After the attack, Earth went silent. The Galactic Assembly waited for news of humanity's collapse. They expected riots. They expected governments falling apart. They expected humans to fight each other for the remaining resources. That was what happened to every other species the Zorath had attacked. That was what weak species did when they faced death. But no news came from Earth. No messages. No broadcasts. Nothing. The Zorath Empire did not care. High Sovereign Kethril, the ruler of the empire, had already forgotten about the humans. They were insects he had stepped on. Nothing more. He moved on to other conquests. Other worlds to burn and enslave. 6 months passed. What the galaxy did not know was that something incredible was happening behind the silence on the day after Admiral Vega's speech at the Galactic Assembly. She returned to Earth. She was taken directly to a meeting with every world leader, every military commander, and every scientist that humanity had left. The meeting lasted 14 hours. When it ended, humanity had made a decision that no more fighting each other. No more borders. No more old hatreds. Every nation, every colony, every faction would work together. They would build. They would prepare. They would become something the galaxy had never seen before. Admiral Vega was given a new title, Supreme Commander of the United Human Defense Force. She was now the leader of every soldier, every ship and every weapon that humanity possessed. She got to work immediately. The first priority was ships. Earth had lost most of its fleet in the attack. The surviving ships were old and weak compared to Zorath technology. They needed new ships. Better ships. Ships that could fight back. Human engineers studied the wreckage left behind by the Zorath attack. They took apart every piece of alien technology they could find. They examined the weapons. They analyzed the engines. They learned how everything worked out. Then they did something that surprised, even themselves. They made it better. The galaxy had been using the same technology for thousands of years. The great empires had grown lazy. They had stopped innovating. They believed their technology was perfect and could not be improved. Humans had only been in space for a century. They were still learning, still experimenting, still asking questions that older species had stopped asking long ago. Human scientists discovered that their understanding of physics was different from galactic knowledge. Not worse, just different. They knew things that the ancient empires had forgotten or never learned. They combined this knowledge with the stolen Zorath technology. The results were terrifying. Human engineers built FTL drives that were 30% faster than anything in the galaxy. They created energy shields that could take twice as much damage. They designed weapons that could cut through Zorath armor like paper. All of this happened in secret. Admiral Vega called it Project Prometheus. The project was hidden in the asteroid belts and inside the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. Thousands of factories worked day and night. Millions of workers built ships, weapons, and armor. Everything was underground. Everything was invisible to outside eyes. The workers did not complain about the long hours. They did not ask for more pay or more rest. They worked because they remembered Titan. They worked because they remembered Mars. They worked because they remembered the 4.2 million who had died. Every human knew someone who had been killed. Every human carried that pain inside them. And every human wanted revenge. Admiral Vega visited the factories often. She walked among the workers and thanked them personally. She memorized names and faces. She never forgot anyone. One night, she stood on a platform overlooking a massive shipyard hidden inside an asteroid. Below her, a new class of battleship was taking shape. It was twice the size of anything humans had built before. It had weapons that could destroy a Zorath cruiser in seconds. "We will call it the Remembrance," she said to her officers, "so we never forget why we fight." Her second in command, a man named General Chun, stood beside her. He had lost his entire family on Mars. His eyes were tired but determined. "The spy satellites have picked up Zorath scout drones near Jupiter," he said. "They might have seen something." "Let them look," Vega replied. "They will see what they expect to see. Nothing." She was right. The Zorath intelligence officers reviewed the footage from the spy drones. They saw activity near Jupiter's moons. They saw ships moving in the asteroid belt. But they dismissed it all. "Humans are scavengers," one officer reported to High Sovereign Kethrol. "They are picking through debris, trying to survive. They are no threat." The High Sovereign laughed. "Of course they are no threat. They are vermin. Forget about them." He never looked at the footage himself. If he had looked more carefully, he might have noticed something strange. The debris that humans were collecting was moving in very organized patterns. The ships were not random survivors. They were flying in formation, but the Zorath were too proud to look carefully at a species they considered already dead. Months continued to pass. The human fleet grew larger. Soldiers trained in new tactics that no species had ever used before. Pilots learned to fly in ways that broke every rule of galactic warfare. Admiral Vega developed a new military doctrine. The Zorath fought with rigid formations and strict rules. They believed in honor and tradition. They announced their attacks and expected their enemies to meet them openly. Humans would not fight like that. Humans would attack without warning. They would hide and ambush. They would use tricks and traps. They would strike from the shadows and disappear before the enemy could respond. They would fight dirty because this was not a game. This was survival. Vega trained her soldiers to be ghosts, to be nightmares, to be the monsters that the Zoroth feared in their darkest dreams. 1 year after the attack, she gathered her commanders on the Bridge of the Remembrance. The ship was beautiful and deadly. Its hull was black as space. Its weapons glowed with barely contained power. "The fleet is ready," General Chun reported. 500 warships. 2 million soldiers. More coming every day. Vega looked at the star map in front of her. It showed the Zoroth Empire in red. It covered nearly half the galaxy. So many worlds. So many soldiers. So much power. And yet she felt no fear. "Send a message to the Zoroth frontier colony Nexus 7, she said. "Tell them we are coming." The war was about to begin. The message appeared on every screen in the Nexus system. Admiral Idris Vega's face looked down at millions of Zoroth soldiers and citizens. Her expression was calm. Her voice was ice. "This is Admiral Vega of the United Human Defense Force. I am giving you one warning. Release all human prisoners in your system. Withdraw your forces from the Orion Spur. You have 72 hours. The transmission ended. Governor Dhexral of Nexus 7 stared at his screen in disbelief. Then he started laughing. He laughed so hard that his forearms shook and his gray skin turned purple. "The humans!" he shouted to his officers. "The little humans are threatening us. Send this to the High Sovereign immediately. He will find it amusing." High Sovereign Kethral was indeed amused. He broadcast his response across the galaxy so everyone could watch. "Little human," he said, his face twisted with mockery. "You dare to give orders to the Zoroth Empire? I will mount your skull in my trophy hall. I will make your bones into jewelry. Your species will be erased from history. We will forget you ever existed." The galaxy watched and waited. Many species secretly hoped the humans would back down. They did not want to see another slaughter. But no one actually believed the humans could win. Exactly 72 hours later, the human fleet appeared. 500 warships dropped out of Vashiel travel at the edge of the Nexus system. They were black as night and moved in perfect silence. They did not announce themselves. They did not wait for the Zoroth to form battle lines. They simply attacked. Governor Dhexral had 300 ships defending his system. He was not worried. The Zoroth had better technology. The Zoroth had more experience. The Zoroth had never lost to a lesser species. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The human ships moved in ways that made no sense to Zoroth tacticians. They did not form the traditional battle lines that all galactic species used. They split into small groups and attacked from multiple directions at once. They hid behind asteroids and moons. They appeared and disappeared like ghosts. The first Zoroth battleship exploded before its commander even knew what was happening. A human ship had snuck behind it, staying in its blind spot, and fired 6 missiles directly into its engines. The battleship broke apart in a ball of fire. "What is happening?" Governor Dhexral screamed from his command center. "How are they doing this?" His officers had no answers. Their screens showed chaos. Human ships were everywhere and nowhere. They did not fight with honor. They did not announce their attacks. They simply killed. Admiral Vega commanded the battle from the Bridge of the Remembrance. Her officers called out targets and coordinates. Her pilots flew with deadly precision. Her soldiers fought like they had nothing to lose, because they had already lost everything. "Focus fire on the command ship," Vega ordered. "Cut off their head." 12 human cruisers converged on Governor Dexrol's flagship. The Zorath ship fired desperately, but the humans were too fast. They dodged and weaved through the weapon's fire like dancers. Then they struck. The governor's flagship was torn apart in seconds. Dexrol died still screaming for reinforcements that would never come. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, all 300 Zorath ships were destroyed. The human fleet had lost only 32 vessels. It was the most one-sided defeat in Zorath history. Admiral Vega did not celebrate. She had work to do. The human ground forces landed on Nexus 7 the next morning. They were looking for something specific. The slave camps. The Zorath kept slaves from many species. They forced them to work in mines and factories. They treated them like animals. And among those slaves were 30,000 humans, captured during raids over the past decades. Vega led the assault. Personally, she jumped out of the landing craft with a rifle in her hands. Her soldiers followed her. They fought through the streets of the Zorath colony, building by building, block by block. The Zorath defenders were confused. Their leaders were dead. Their fleet was destroyed. And the humans fought with a fury they had never seen before. Private Marcus Obi was 22 years old. His sister had died on Titan Station. He had joined the military the day after the attack. Now he fought beside his admiral, clearing rooms and rescuing prisoners. They found the first slave camp at noon. The conditions were terrible. Humans were kept in small cages like animals. Many were sick. Many were injured. All of them had lost hope. Until they saw the soldiers with Earth flags on their shoulders. An old woman grabbed Marcus's arm. She was thin and weak. Her eyes were filled with tears. "You came for us," she whispered. "You really came." Marcus knelt beside her. "Yes, ma'am. We came. And we're taking you home." By the end of the day, all 30,000 human prisoners were freed. Vega walked through the liberated camps and looked into the faces of her rescued people. She saw their pain. She saw their relief. She saw their anger. These were not just numbers. These were mothers and fathers, sons and daughters. They had been stolen from their homes and forced into slavery. And now they were free. Before the human fleet left Nexus 7, Admiral Vega had a message carved into the walls of the planetary capital. The letters were 10 meters tall. They would be visible from space. "We remember Titan. We remember Mars. We remember New Geneva. We are coming." The galaxy watched the news in shock. The Zorath Empire had been humiliated. A lesser species had defeated them in open battle. It was impossible. It was unthinkable, and yet it had happened. High Sovereign Kethril received the news in his throne room. He did not laugh this time. His face was dark with rage. "Send the second fleet to destroy them," he commanded. "I want every human dead. I want their worlds burned. I want their children's children to feel our wrath." The Zorath war machine began to move, but so did the humans. The war had truly begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the quiet of her cabin that night, Admiral Vega looked at a small holographic picture. It showed a little girl with a beaded bracelet, smiling at the camera. "We're coming, Maya," she whispered. "We're coming for all of them." She placed the picture beside her bed and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, there would be more battles, more death, more revenge. She was ready. The war raged for 4 long years. The Zorath Empire had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had conquered hundreds of species. They had never been seriously challenged. They believed they were unbeatable. The humans proved them wrong again and again. After the victory at Nexus 7, Admiral Vega pushed deeper into Zorath territory. Her fleet grew larger with each passing month. New ships arrived from the hidden factories near Jupiter. New soldiers joined from every corner of human space. Everyone wanted to fight. Everyone wanted revenge. The Zorath sent their second fleet to stop the humans. It was destroyed in 3 weeks. They sent their third fleet. It lasted a month. They sent their fourth and fifth fleets together, over 1,000 ships. The battle lasted 6 days. When it was over, the humans had lost 200 ships. The Zorath had lost everything. The galaxy watched in amazement. They could not understand what was happening. How could a young species defeat the greatest military power in known space? The answer was simple. Humans did not fight like anyone else. Zorath commanders followed ancient rules of warfare. They formed battle lines. They announced their attacks. They expected their enemies to fight with honor. These traditions had worked for thousands of years, but humans had no traditions. They had only desperation and fury. Admiral Vega created a special unit called the Ghosts of Titan. They were the best soldiers humanity had. They went behind enemy lines and caused chaos. They destroyed supply depots. They assassinated commanders. They freed slaves and turned them into allies. Lieutenant Sarah Kim led one of these ghost teams. She was small and quiet, but deadly in combat. She had lost her entire family on Mars. Now she spent her nights sneaking into Zorath bases and making them pay. One night, her team infiltrated a Zorath communications center. They planted explosives and prepared to escape. But Sarah found something unexpected. A room full of prisoners. They were not humans. They were Voltari, a species that the Zorath had conquered centuries ago. They were thin and weak. They looked at Sarah with fear. "We are not Zorath," Sarah said gently. "We are human. We are going to help you." The Voltari did not understand at first. No one had ever helped them. They had been slaves for so long that they had forgotten what freedom felt like. Sarah led them out of the base before it exploded. She gave them food and water. She arranged transport to a safe location. Word of this spread. The humans were not just fighting for themselves. They were freeing everyone the Zorath had enslaved. Other species began to take notice. Some began to hope. As the war continued, the Zorath grew desperate. They tried everything to stop the human advance. They used biological weapons. Human scientists developed cures within weeks. They tried to hire mercenaries from other species. Those species refused. Some were afraid of human revenge. Others had suffered under Zorath rule and wanted to see them fall. They launched surprise attacks on human supply lines. Admiral Vega had anticipated this. She set traps that destroyed the attacking fleets. Nothing worked. High Sovereign Kethral became obsessed with killing Admiral Vega. He believed that if she died, the humans would lose hope and surrender. He sent assassins after her. They all failed. He put a bounty on her head so large that it could buy a planet. No one collected it. Vega was always careful. She changed her location constantly. She had loyal guards who would die for her. And she had something that no amount of money could defeat: the love of her soldiers. She led from the front. She never asked her people to do something she would not do herself. She ate the same food as the lowest private. She learned the names of every soldier who died under her command. She cried at their funerals. In the third year of the war, the Zorath made their most desperate move. They had built a planet killer, a weapon so powerful that it could destroy an entire world in one shot. They had never used it before because they had never needed it. Now they aimed it at Kepler 442b, a planet where the humans had built a major forward base. 5 million people lived there, including many civilians. When Vega received the intelligence report, she went pale. "We have to evacuate," General Chun said urgently. "We can save most of them if we move now." "How long until the weapon arrives?" 18 hours. Vega made the hardest decision of her life. She ordered the evacuation of all civilians. She sent most of her fleet to help with transport, but she stayed behind with a small force of 50 ships. "What are you doing?" Chun demanded. "I am buying time," she answered. "Every minute we hold them is a minute more for our people to escape. You will die, maybe, but they will live." Chun wanted to argue. He wanted to order her to leave, but he knew that face. He had served with Idris Vega for 4 years. He knew that nothing would change her mind. "I will stay with you," he said quietly. "No, you will lead the evacuation." "That is an order." Chun saluted. His eyes were wet. "It has been an honor, Admiral. The honor was mine." The battle was brutal. Vega's 50 ships faced over 200 Zarath warships protecting the planet killer. The odds were impossible, but they fought anyway. For 12 hours, the small human force dodged and attacked and died. Ship after ship was destroyed. Friends killed before Vega's eyes. But they held the line. When only the remembrance was left, Vega made her final move. She ordered all remaining power to the engines. The great ship accelerated toward the planet killer. The Zarath fired everything at her. Missiles struck the remembrance. Lasers tore through the hull. Fire erupted on every deck, but the ship kept coming down at the last moment. Vega fired every weapon she had. The missiles struck the planet killer's core, just as the remembrance smashed into its side. The explosion lit up the entire system. When the light faded, the planet killer was destroyed. Kepler 442b was saved. 4 million civilians had escaped. Search teams found the remembrance floating dead in space. The ship was destroyed beyond repair. But in the wreckage of the bridge, they found Admiral Vega. She was alive. Half her face was burned. She had lost an eye. Shrapnel had torn into her body. But she was breathing. She woke up 3 days later in a hospital ship. General Chun was beside her bed. "You did it," he said. "You saved them all." Vega looked at him with her one remaining eye. Doctors had replaced the missing eye with a cybernetic one. Her face was scarred. She would never look the same again, but her voice was still strong. "We are not done yet. We have an empire to destroy." The war continued, and the humans kept coming. 5 years after the attack on Earth, the human fleet arrived at Kethraxis Prime. The Zarath homeworld was ancient and beautiful. Great cities stretched across its surface. Monuments to 10,000 years of conquest touched the sky. The palace of the High Sovereign sat at the center of the largest city, a mountain of gold and stone that could be seen from space. Today, it would see something it had never seen before, an enemy at its gates. Admiral Idris Vega stood on the bridge of her new flagship. The remembrance, too. Her face was scarred. One eye was metal and glowed with soft blue light. But her voice was still steady. Her mind was still sharp. Around her were 1,000 human warships. But they were not alone. The Veltari had joined them. So had the Kresh, the Thalani, and a dozen other species that the Zarath had enslaved and conquered. Word of human victories had spread across the galaxy. Word of humans freeing prisoners. Word of humans treating their enemies with fairness. For the first time in centuries, the slaves had hope. And they had come to see the Zarath fall. The Zarath fleet defending the homeworld was the largest ever assembled. 2,000 ships. The best commanders. The strongest weapons. High Sovereign Kethrol had gathered everything he had left. It was not enough. The battle lasted 3 days. Human tactics and allied support crushed the Zarath defenses. One by one, the great Zarath battleships fell. One by one, the defensive stations were destroyed. The sky above Kethraxis Prime filled with fire and debris. On the 3rd day, Admiral Vega broadcast to the planet below. "High Sovereign Kethrol, your fleet is destroyed. Your empire is falling. Surrender now and your people will be treated fairly." Continue to resist and you will share the fate of your ships. The response came minutes later. Kethral's face appeared on the screen. He looked old and tired. His gray skin was pale. His forearms trembled with rage. I will never surrender to vermin, he spat. I am High Sovereign of the Zorth Empire. My ancestors built a civilization when your species was living in caves. You are nothing. You will always be nothing. Viga's expression did not change. Then we will come for you. The ground assault began at dawn. Human Marines landed around the capital city. They were joined by allied soldiers from a dozen species. The Zoreth defenders fought hard, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. Building by building, street by street, the attackers pushed toward the palace. Admiral Viga led the assault on the palace itself. She had promised herself that she would be there at the end. She had started this journey on a platform at the Galactic Assembly, making a promise that the galaxy laughed at. Now she would finish it. The palace was heavily defended. Elite Zoreth guards protected every entrance. They were the best soldiers the Empire had. They had never failed. They failed today. Lieutenant Sarah Kim and her ghost team cleared the outer defenses. General Chun led the main force through the grand halls. Viga followed with her personal guard, stepping over the bodies of fallen enemies. They found Kethral in his throne room. He sat alone on his golden throne. His guards were dead or had fled. His generals had abandoned him. His empire was crumbling, but he still refused to surrender. So, he said as Viga entered the room, the little human has come at last. Viga walked toward him slowly. Her boots echoed on the marble floor. Her soldiers spread out behind her, covering every exit. It is over, she said. Your fleet is destroyed. Your army is defeated. Your empire is finished. Kethral laughed, but there was no humor in it. Just bitterness and hate. You think you have won? He asked. Look at what you have become. You are killers now. You are conquerors. You are no different from us. Viga stopped in front of the throne. She looked at the creature who had ordered the deaths of 4.2 million of her people. The creature who had killed her husband, her daughter, everything she had loved. For a moment, she wanted to kill him. She wanted to take her weapon and end his life right there. It would be so easy. It would be so satisfying, but she did not. We were peaceful, she said quietly. We asked for nothing but to exist. We wanted to trade and learn and grow beside you. But you saw our kindness as weakness. You murdered our children and called it a lesson. She leaned closer. We did not become monsters. We became your consequences. Kethral stared at her with confusion. He had expected rage. He had expected violence. He had expected her to be just like him. Instead, she turned to her soldiers. Arrest him. He will stand trial before the Galactic Assembly. Every species he has wronged will witness his judgment. Kethral screamed in protest. He would rather die than face such humiliation. But human soldiers grabbed his arms and dragged him from his throne. The last High Sovereign of the Zoreth Empire left his palace in chains. The war was over. In the weeks that followed, the Zoreth Empire was dissolved. Conquered species gained their freedom. Slave planets were liberated. The great military machine that had terrorized the galaxy for 10,000 years was dismantled. Many expected the humans to take the empire for themselves. They had earned it through blood and sacrifice. No one would have stopped them, but Admiral Viga refused. We did not fight to become rulers, she told the Galactic Assembly. We fought to survive. We fought to free our people. We fought so that no species would ever suffer what we suffered. She looked out at the hundreds of ambassadors gathered before her. 5 years ago, they had laughed at her. Now, they listened in respectful silence. Let this be remembered, she said. Not as humanity's conquest, but as a warning. We do not seek war. We do not desire power over others. But if you come for our homes, our families, our future, we will make you regret it until the stars themselves burn out." She paused. "We are humanity. We do not forget. And we do not forgive those who harm the innocent. But we also know when to stop. We know the difference between justice and cruelty. That is what makes us human." She stepped down from the podium. The war was over. The dead could never return. But their memory would live forever. Years later, a young Zorath student visited the human memorial on Titan. The station had been rebuilt. Millions of people lived there now. And in the center of the station stood a great wall of black marble. On the wall were carved the names of the 4.2 million who had died. The names stretched for kilometers. Each one a life. Each one a story. Each one remembered. The student found a human guide standing near the wall. He was old and missing an arm. "Why did you not destroy us?" she asked. "After everything we did to you, why did you show mercy?" The old soldier looked at her. His eyes were kind. "Because then we would be no different from what we fought against. We fight to protect, not to destroy. That is what makes us human." The young Zorath looked at the endless names on the wall. She finally understood. Humanity had won not because they were stronger or cooler. They had won because they had something worth fighting for. And they knew when to put down their weapons and build instead of destroy. The galaxy had learned its lesson, and humanity stood, ready to defend the peace they had earned with blood and tears, not as conquerors, as guardians.